everyone who is here this morning and who may be viewing this video later. Welcome on behalf of the Natural Hazard Center team at the University of Colorado Boulder, which is home to the National Science Foundation funded Converge facility, as well as the headquarters of the Social Science Extreme Events Research Network. And it is my honor and pleasure to welcome you here today to one of our most recent virtual forums in the SSEER Virtual Forum series. This one focused on the 2023 earthquakes that shook and devastated Southern Turkey as well as parts of Syria earlier this year. And I welcome again all of you who are on the call and those who are viewing this at a later time. And so to begin, I just want to give a brief overview of how we are going to spend our 1 hour today and what the bigger objective of this virtual forum really is. And so to begin, we're going to start, and I'm going to provide a brief update on the SSEER response to the earthquakes to date, and especially as this relates to broader coordination efforts that are being led by the Earthquake Engineering Research Institute, Learning from Earthquakes program, as well as to several other extreme events research and reconnaissance networks supported through the NSF. I'll then share a few resources that I hope will be of use to the researchers who are on this call. Then we're going to have a 15-minute briefing from a team of incredibly distinguished, talented researchers who have only just returned from an initial quick response investigation. And so we'll hear that briefing with a special eye towards immediate as well as longer term social science research needs. And then all remaining time, as always with these virtual forums, will be dedicated to resource sharing, to discussing social science research needs, but also to focusing on ethical, safety, logistical, and other potential concerns, challenges, or opportunities when it comes to fieldwork. Before I proceed any further, I want to say the following, that I know as disaster researchers that we oftentimes start out meetings like this by discussing the statistics of the disaster loss that has occurred, and there are good reasons for that. I also know that we run a risk of just issuing out numbers. Tens of thousands of people have perished in this disaster. Many tens of thousands more are permanently dislocated. And the risk with sharing numbers with that is that they do become a gray statistical blur, and it obscures the fact that I know that we have people on this call today who are from the immediately affected areas. We have people on this call whose parents are still living in or are from the areas. We have people on this call who have lost loved ones in this disaster. And so may we never lose sight of the human consequences of this event and how our social science and allied research communities have been affected in these earthquakes. And again, I thank all of you for joining with us this morning. And so to begin, I just want to say a few words of introduction. I know that the vast majority of persons who registered for this virtual forum are already members of the Social Science Extreme Events Research Network. But for those of you who aren't aware of this network, it's one of 8 National Science Foundation funded extreme events research and reconnaissance networks. And our network focuses specifically on social scientists who study hazards and disasters. And our core mission is to advance scholarship on the root causes as well as the human consequences of extreme events by coordinating social science teams in large-scale disasters, and also issuing a series of resources that we hope will be available to and useful to social scientists as well as to our partners in other disciplines. And to date, we have 1,484 people around the world, social and behavioral scientists, who have joined the SSEER network. If you are a social scientist who studies hazards or disasters and you are on this call, we hope that you will visit the Converge website to join the SSEER network and to become a part of this global network of persons who are studying risk, hazards, and disasters from a social science lens. Specific to this response to this disaster and building on an effort that the Earthquake Engineering Research Institute led in terms of trying to coordinate teams from multiple disciplines, our SSEER team set up a Google form rapidly after the earthquakes struck the affected regions and just invited members of the SSEER network to express an interest in joining a potential field team led by social scientists and or a larger multidisciplinary team that may be co-led by engineers and social scientists, for example. And so I want to give you a brief update on the incredible generosity of our SSEER community, what has been learned from the forum and what has already been shared. And so a few things I wanted to note. 30 people filled out this form and expressed a strong interest in becoming involved in an SSEER-led team or a multidisciplinary team, should we choose, especially after this virtual forum today and hearing from Süleyman, Louise, and Burçak to do so. 30 people expressed a strong interest in becoming members of such a field team. Of those 30 people, half are located here in the US, 15, 5 are located in Turkey, 4 in Canada, 2 in India, and the remaining SSEER members came from a variety of countries, including Nepal, Singapore, England, Wales, Germany, Italy, and Singapore. I said Singapore twice, excuse me. I also wanted to note of those who signed up, the collective experience of those who said they would be interested in a field team is nothing short of breathtaking. In our SSEER network more generally, our analysis of the SSEER sign-up data tells us that SSEER members have studied over 300 unique earthquake events. Of those 30 people who said they were interested in this event in particular, they have studied over 40 earthquake events in their careers. And looking at Louise Comfort right now, she alone has responded to 23 earthquake disasters in her long and storied career. And so collectively, this network is bringing an incredible amount of field experience in earthquakes and other disasters, and incredible commitment to sharing information, data, field instruments, as you're going to hear from Courtney Welton Mitchell shortly this morning, and so forth. We also received a number of publications, local contacts in Turkey, and other resources through this Google form. And so in the interest of time, that's just my briefing on what we learned in the form, but we will pick that up later in the discussion if anybody has questions about those responses to the form. And thank you again to the 30 people who filled it out. I wanted to note again, as I said earlier, that SSEER is indeed part of a much larger network of NSF and now Centers for Disease Control and Prevention funded extreme events research and reconnaissance networks that are also connected to shared use facilities through the National Science Foundation that help with providing, for example, with the RAPID facility, tools and instruments for doing rapid reconnaissance research, through the Converge facility with training and education resources, and through Design Safe with data management and data publication. If anyone has any questions about the other networks or shared use facilities, we can also open that up during the Q&A. I wanted to point everyone on the call, as noted, to the freely available resources through our Converge website. We have extreme events research check sheets that are meant rapid background emerging researchers and students on the rapid collection of perishable data, as well as other long-standing methodological and ethical concerns in the hazard field. We also now have 11 online training modules that we hope can help researchers to quickly background themselves on decades of social science knowledge in core areas such as cultural competence, conducting emotionally challenging research, and collecting perishable data, among other topics. And so with that, I'm going to stop with my opening remarks. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and turn over screen sharing to our 3, again, incredibly distinguished colleagues, Dr. Louise Comfort, Dr. Burçak Erkan, and Dr. Süleyman Çelik. who were awarded a quick response research award through the Natural Hazard Center with the support of the National Science Foundation. And they have only just returned, again, only days ago, from the field and for collecting data for their research report. They're going to give us a broader briefing, however, on their initial insights into, again, the immediate and longer term social science oriented research concerns associated with this event. And so without further ado, Dr. Louise Comfort, friend and colleague, I am so happy to turn this virtual forum over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, very much. I'm going to share my screen. And I really appreciate the opportunity that you gave us, Lori, to do this quick response. And I also want to acknowledge my two colleagues, Burçak Erkan, Süleyman Çelik. I absolutely could not have done it without them, and also with other colleagues in Turkey. So our purpose was really to map the communication and coordination networks in response to the Kahramanmaras earthquakes in Turkey. And we promised to keep our presentations brief, so mine is just very straight text, and Süleyman, however, will show some photos. First, our quick response study was really intended to identify the major issues for social science research that were generated by these devastating earthquakes. And the primary focus of this team was to assess the communication and coordination processes in practice before, during, and after the earthquakes. Turkey has a national disaster management agency. It has well-developed disaster plans, but the contrast between what the plans are on paper and what actually happens in the field is what we were looking at. So our primary research methods were semi-structured interviews with Turkish experts, and we tried to make this interdisciplinary in psychology, public administration, earthquake engineering, nonprofit management, education, business administration, and then, of course, our direct field observations. For our field observations, we spent 3 days in the field. Süleyman, bless his heart, was the driver through these really devastated towns, but we went to the Kahramanmaras province center, to Burçak, which was one of the communities that was very much damaged, the Gaziantep province center, and districts in Gaziantep and the Hatay province center. Hatay was the southernmost province and the one that was most damaged. And then within Hatay, we visited 3 districts that were very severely damaged. And we ended with Gölbaşı in the more northern province of Adıyaman. And the key issues that we discovered were the socioeconomic, and they occurred in a socioeconomic political context. And we saw cascading disasters. So the collapsed housing triggered internal migration with families scattered across the country. This engendered psychosocial trauma in these damaged cities, the impact on the schools, and interestingly, the interests of technology. So the important thing is to recognize the sudden impact of an earthquake. So on February 5th, the day before, here is Turkey. Seismic risk, known risk in the country. The major earthquake faults are mapped. There are major changes in policies, building codes, disaster planning that were enacted after the 1999 earthquakes. In economic conditions, Turkey is a middle income country, but it's been characterized by rapid urbanization in the last 30, maybe 40 years. But the primary driver of that urbanization and economic growth has been the construction industry that actually contributed to the scale and the devastation of this event. And in recent years, the last 2-3 years, there's been a rapid increase in inflation that has added to the economic and social uncertainty in the country. This then has led to a fragmented society with deep political divisions, lack of trust, lack of communication within and between organizations, and institutions that have been hollowed out by loyalty tests to the current government. It also has occurred in a political context. There are presidential elections scheduled for May 2023. And the response to the devastating events is colored by the election campaigns and the rivalries and the very deep suspicion between the governing party and the opposition party. It also has found Turkey in technological conditions, highly innovative uses of technology in response operations, use of drones for damage assessment, GIS for mapping areas of risk, WhatsApp groups for rapid communication, and the mobile phone penetration in Turkey is 101%. Now, after February 6th, we see a different Turkey. Sudden impact of these severe earthquakes, wide region affected, 11 provinces, damage, destruction varied substantially among the 10 major cities in this earthquake region and the many smaller districts in the region. Interestingly, the expert judgment of the people we consulted were that the changes that were designed and adopted after the 1999 Marmara and Düzce earthquakes were not sustained despite the knowledge, capacity, and skills to reduce seismic risk. Rather, the actions initiated after 1999 were overridden by other priorities and choices at enormous cost. The losses, as Laurie mentioned earlier, the loss in lives exceed now 58,000, over 20,000 fatalities in Turkey, an additional 8,000 plus in Syria, 214,000 buildings have collapsed in the region, 3.5 million residents have left the area, and the cost is estimated at $102 billion US, and that cost is likely to rise. Now, the challenge is how to rebuild the area, reestablish communities, reconnect families, neighborhoods in sustainable ways. The seismic risk remains. Earthquakes will recur. The real challenge is, can people learn to live with risk as it will continue? So in terms of identifying the major areas for social science research, we've got a long list, and it's a critical list. First are communications. And in Turkey, there was a significant discrepancy between the technical capacity for electronic communication and the organizational capacity to manage accurate, reliable information exchange, especially for the first 3 days after the earthquake. Communication was almost non-existent in the damaged cities. Without communication, coordination largely failed in these first days. And so these first days were chaotic. It was difficult to send help. And these, of course, are the crucial time for life-saving rescue. And the failure of communication and coordination in rescue compounded the distrust and the anger in these heavily damaged districts. Then the third area, critical area, is shelter. With the collapse of housing, people left the area. There was no place to live. It was winter. They were outside in the cold. So they scattered all across the country. And the government actually closed the universities. And so people were housed in the dormitories of public universities. But the big question is, will the families return? Will rapidly constructed housing be built to code? The president has promised to rebuild all of the housing within 1 year. Will this disaster be recreated in a later decade. Then this compounded the psychological effects for the people who lived through this event. And the psychological trauma was a major factor, especially in these heavily damaged cities. The size and the scale of losses disrupted the basic sense of security, stability. Whole communities experienced post-traumatic stress, loss of family, home, friends, work, familiar landscapes, and neighborhoods increased the uncertainty and the anxiety. But the good news really was in education. Education became a central focus of communities. They wanted to reopen the schools, to enable the children to return to school, to reconnect families and teachers, and reestablish the daily routines. And then finally, technology is a very important story in Turkey here. And innovative uses of technology can make information more accessible, enable greater information exchange, self-organization in rebuilding lives, communities, and increase connectedness. And so there's a long list of social science research subjects, but for acknowledgements, we express our sincere condolences for the lives lost and disrupted in these damaging events, and give our profound admiration and support for the people of Turkey who are working to rebuild the damaged communities in sustainable ways. And we give warm thanks to the Natural Hazard Center and Laurie at the University of Colorado Boulder for supporting this study through the Quick Response Program. And finally, we also give warm thanks to the experienced researchers and colleagues in Turkey who facilitated this study with their insights, suggestions, and references. And these include Professors Rushan Kelesh, Polat Golkan, Nuray Karanchi, who is on the call. Hi, Nuray. Hussein Galer, Mustafa Erdik, Ganesh Ertan, Ali Tekin, and Dr. Olvi Saran. And we also thank the members of the organizations we visited for their candor and their information. Anda, Kizilay, AFAD, OCHA, and the Public Research Foundation. And now I'll turn the platform over to Süleyman Çelik, who actually drove through these cities in our field observation. So I'll stop sharing my screen.
So I will start sharing mine. Able to do it. Is it good?
Yes.
Yes, it is good.
Yes.
Oh, thanks God. Okay, I don't have much time, so I'm going to go fast.
Maybe put it on full screen mode.
Full screen? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm going to follow the slide in terms of style, Dr. Comfort slides. So I'm going to talk about the field observations that we have seen. And so we visited cities, 4 main provinces. We started with Gaziantep. You know, we just landed in Gaziantep. We rented a car and we settled in the hotel. After 20 minutes later, we were driving to Kahramanmaraş province center. So we went to Kahramanmaraş around like 1 p.m. We talked to the guys, one from AFAD, one from UN, you know, OSHA. One was at the end of our, you know, conversation. We have seen the team leader, rescue team leader, coming from Ankara. So we talked basically 3 guys in Kahramanmaraş. So, you know, we asked them about the situation, especially regarding the communication issues. So what they told us is, you know, communication was down after the earthquake happened. GSM operators, Turkey has like 3 main GSM operators, and all of them were down, especially at the center of the Kahramanmaraş, because the GSM, they use base stations over building. This is how they do it in cities. When the buildings were collapsed and all base station, you know, most of them were gone, so they couldn't able to, you know, use communication with each other, in terms of organization, and also with people, residents, and citizens. The city center was out of electricity, which also affected communication, affected, even the phones came up, they start to work because there was no electricity. They couldn't plug their, recharge the phones. They were not able to recharge their phones because there was no electricity. They used satellite phones and walkie-talkies mainly in the first couple of days, but just a few officials and rescue team leaders had these satellite phones. So they mainly, they get used to communicate via WhatsApp, mainly WhatsApp groups. Because GSM operators were down, they couldn't use them. And first couple days, especially in the center of Maraş, they had a hard time to coordinate operations. So after this one, around 4 p.m., we started draw to Pazarcık, which is the district of Kahramanmaras. This is the place that the first earthquake happened. 7.7 earthquake happened. Pazarcık, it was damaged, but what we have seen, what I witnessed, is that most of the buildings were standing, even though heavily damaged, were standing. So because of that, it became easier compared to like Antakya. It became easier to restore communication. What they have used is the governor told us that they focused on electricity. They restored electricity the second day. After that, they got the internet back. So they used the internet signal to reach the villages. So when they, the base station got signal from villages, they sent helicopters, the assistance or rescue teams to these villages. But mainly, again, GSM operators didn't work. They used mobile trucks, mobile cars, But first 36 hours, they told us, there was not much communication, not much electricity. But after 36 hours, they were able to, use the, some sort of communication via internet to send helps to the villages and other places. Hatay, when we talk about, if you talk about the earthquake in Turkey, earthquake happened in Hatay. Even though we say 11 or 10 cities were damaged because of the earthquake, but you cannot compare the Hatay or especially center of Hatay, the Antakya, with other cities. Hatay was just totally gone. Hatay was one of the most cosmopolitan city in Turkey. People from different background, different faith, that they were Jewish there, the Christians people were there, Arabs, Turks, many. It's just sort of one of the oldest cities, city center in Turkey. And then we were so sorry to see that, the buildings, the roads and all, constructions, they're just gone. So we have to build basically a new city from the, from the bottom up. So on the way to Antakya, we seen the Nurdal and Islahiye, which were the two districts of Gaziantep, and then Kırıkkale, and then Defne, Antakya, and Samandağ. You can imagine that 200 kilometers, those cities and districts are on the way. So, and then the one that collapsed, least collapsed, at least 50% buildings were gone. So it was so hard in terms of transportation because the airport was damaged. The traffic jammed because people trying to get out of city or trying to get in the city to help. There was no communication, even for some villages and for Samandağ and Defne. The resident told us that for 5 days they couldn't get anybody, not just 3 days. They couldn't get anybody, any help. So Yusuf, he was our driver, student of Burçak. He was, telling us that they hear the people just screaming under the buildings, for many days, for many hours. Some of them are burning, some of them are just under the buildings, and they couldn't help them because they did not have any communication. at all. So Antakya, Kırıkkale, and definitely all these districts and cities, just like almost it took like a week to reach some villages. Even the governor told us that he said that if there's going to be another future earthquake, I would declare that do not send any help to the city because of the assistance and because of the help, because of the trucks, they couldn't even coordinate these trucks. And these trucks, they jammed the traffic. So they just like for 3 days almost, they couldn't move to help anybody to go anywhere. So that was a big issue in terms of coordination and communication. The last day we went to Gölbaşı district, Adıyaman. It was, again, one of the most damaged cities in Adıyaman. The district was like, it's just like there was a road, main road across all the districts. Then the upper side of roads were like 80% okay, but down the road, like almost collapsed. The municipality building collapsed. Government building was collapsed. Social service building was collapsed. Schools mostly collapsed or cannot be used. Even when we visited there was no electricity in that part of the region. So again, the guy told us that the director of National Education or District National Education Ministry, he told us that the first 2 days they couldn't get any communication. So they were trying to save the people, themselves. Even, they just took the people out, they buried them themselves. So he told us that the real number, that number is not correct because in 2 days there was nobody here. We saved people or we buried the people so we can, let the Afad knows. In that city, we visited, social service guy and the 10 schools and 10 cities that you see over there. They were doing this, schools especially for the 8th and 12th grade students because there is an exam to enter high school and also to enter university. So especially there were like smart guys over there. One of them, just like behind me, I just told them he's gonna come to Berkeley. He promised me because they expect him to be one of the best in the exam. So the teachers, they were like, sort of like devoting their time to these children. And then they were also established a tent city for psychological support. They told us that the first day, just like 5 children and family came. But after they have seen this, the playing game and theater over there, and then they start to came like at least, minimum number, he said to us, minimum number was like 200 people. They come every day, especially mothers. They need more psychological support than their children, they told us. So they created some sort of like stance for mothers to use to get they're dealing with the other stuff and at least smiling. And one more thing that they told us in this psychological support, education, the dealing with the children, they get a lot of support from nonprofit organizations. The nonprofit organization, they brought clowns over there. They brought toys over there. Every day there was some sort of like, a show in the distant cities. So they were so helpful. They told us, nonprofit organization. And even the director said that, we have to keep going on this because after 3 months, maybe there will not be any public organization maybe supporting the psychological, issue, dealing with this issue. So they, at least will try to get the help from nonprofit organizations. So this is general evaluation here. I already, mostly talk about this. So if you have any question later on, I'm happy because we have seen a lot. If I start to talk about all these things that we have seen, but Dr. Comfort, God gives her, 10, 20 more years with us. It is so hard and it's challenging to work with her because I was tired, but she was not. She lost her voice. But even just before the airplane, we have to catch the airplane. I told her, like, do you want to go to Adıyaman? If I say yes, she would say yes. She would say yes, she was that, eager to do this. So thanks listening to me. So we have to keep going with, I think, Burçak.
Hello, thank you. I'll share my screen as well. Can you see it, please?
Yes, it's not in the full screen
Yeah.
just yet. There it is.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Burçak.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to Dr. Comfort and Süleyman for being a good, superior teammates. Thank you to everyone who participated in this talk. I have seen the names of Professor Nuray Karancı, Professor Ruşen Keleş, and Professor Polat Gülkan is also attending the talk. Thank you for your time. Before I start with the institutional capacity, which is my part of today, I would like to say the earthquake didn't come as a surprise. It happened at 4:17 a.m. in the morning, and we received that there was an earthquake in Kahramanmaras region, which is southeast of Turkey, east-southeast, where the Eastern Anatolian fault line is active, and active fault lines passes underneath cities of Antakya, active fault line like Kobe city, active fault lines passes underneath city in Kahramanmaras, in Hatay, Antakya, and this didn't come as a surprise at all. So what was missing was preparedness, although there were some actions, but it wasn't completed and taken in advance. What we learned as a result, like I can very happily say, it is a sad event, but there is a huge solidarity of nation. And yesterday I saw a car driving with plate number from Antakya, and I waved them, and they waved me back. And we put the horns on, and we didn't know each other, but there's a nationwide solidarity, which came as only one good point from this earthquake, I should say. Disaster and emergency, now my part, for some critics and thinking of the institutional capacity in Turkey. Disaster and Emergency Management Authority, okay, I don't know if you see this, yeah, we got it, that's gone. Disaster and Emergency Management Authority. The abbreviation is AFAD, and this is the main institutional body to coordinate all hazard and emergency-related activities before, during, and after an event by law number 5902 since 2009, so 14 years, his background, under the former Prime Minister's office. They were set back in 2009 as a law, so which is supposed to be strong as a coordination body for all activities, preparedness, response, and recovery afterwards. So that time we had a Prime Minister's office in Turkey, and AFAD was directly linked to that office to cut down paperwork in case of emergencies and preparedness. But that wasn't a brand new organization which came out as a blue. It was the unification of the former General Directorate of Disaster Affairs, which was under Ministry of Construction that time, General Directorate of Civil Defense, which was under Ministry of Interior that time, and General Directorate of Turkey Emergency Management. So these three institutions with historical background and institutional capacity with their employees had been united under one roof as AFAD in 2009. So the aim to set up such institution was to have a bottom-up decentralized system in Turkey, because jurisdictionally, social-wise, Turkey has a top-down centralized approach. So all 80 provinces wait orders to come from Ankara. This used to be the case. So the aim to set up, the idea to set up AFAD was to get rid of it and have a more bottom-up decentralized system so that the local can prepare, can respond, and can recover if there's a case of a disaster before, during, and after. So you don't waste time, because if it's disaster and emergency management, the time is the most crucial element, as we have seen in the previous slides. Like there was a problem with the timing. However, in 2018, when the government system changed in Turkey, AFAD was because the former prime minister's office was dismissed. Now we have a presidential office. AFAD is now connected to Ministry of Interior. So it went back to the previous system, like the old days, from bottom-up decentralized idea. Again, things started being top-down and too much centralized. This is one of the, I think, from the field observations, from the colleagues that I have lots of colleagues in AFAD, so they criticize themselves, they give feedback unofficially, but the most big question of concern is, as because they're connected to Ministry of Interior now, this intention of being under Prime Minister's office degraded down. So they say Ministry of Health people don't listen to us. Ministry of Family and Social Security doesn't listen to us because we don't have any power or authority or have a word to say over them, because they are only linked to a Ministry of Interior. So all line ministries have the same power. This is what I hear unofficially from the AFAD colleagues. Second slide. Everyone in the field worked with good intention. That is definitely for sure, but it is also for sure that there was a gap in collaboration and cooperation. Day one onwards, first hours of the earthquake, technology, I received so many WhatsApp messages because I have been working in this field like as a statistician. My background is statistics, but I work in disaster risk management past 24 years with the professors that I mentioned their names, and I'm so lucky to be touched by them. And I received messages for the rubbles, address information, who was locked under the rubble, and people somehow reached to me and they sent me messages from WhatsApp, rubble in that location, this many people with these names, and I passed the information quickly. So like first few days, like my eyes so much tired because I had to pass information, check my WhatsApp very often and send it to the AFAD headquarters colleagues here. We did it like, as I said, there was a big solidarity of the nation, so we spent hours and hours passing the rubble information. But the problem is, in the field at the local level, there were no equipment or machinery or personnel in the first few days. As I said, again, like system became reversed and it became too centralized and top down since 2018, I should say, to be honest. And the local authorities, even the AFAD Adıyaman building, which was built 2 years ago, was demolished and collapsed after the earthquake. That is unbelievable if you ask me. I'm not a civil engineer, but like a building of AFAD built 2 years ago, how can it be demolished or collapsed? It can be collapsed. And the community in all 11 provinces, they state that one common sentence, there was a delay in response, especially in the first 3 days. As Dr. Comfort and my colleague Süleyman also mentioned in their slides, there was definitely a delay in the first 3 days. Somehow, I don't know why, when, how it happened, but it happened because the community suffered a lot. And the human stories are the best way to express their feelings. I heard from survivors from the earthquake, because it was like they were caught in a sleep. When they went out, if they had the opportunity to run away and escape, they had nothing like slippers or shoes, so they didn't even feel the pain, like where they had the cuts under their feet because of glass, because of stones. It was raining, cold, and people had nothing to cover their shoes, and they didn't even feel the pain for a few days because of the cuts. There are very valuable and knowledgeable colleagues at AFAD, and the problem is with the administration teams, as the president, vice presidents, and head of divisions are appointed mainly for political purposes. I'll be very honest with you. I used to go and give them a courtesy visit when they were first appointed as the head of the divisions, and the shift was so quick, like I gave up. So they appointed someone, few months later, a new name come with the political background, another name come with political background, so I gave up paying them a courtesy visit to get to introduce to them. Most of them do not have any disaster emergency background, so that type of stuff becomes a test for them. So with the previous earthquake in Izmir back in October 2020, some of the head of divisions were newly appointed, and the AFAD colleagues who were in the teams from the past, they said the new appointed people were like in a shock when they heard there was an earthquake. So it is a time investment, it is an educational investment. It needs energy, new stuff, but experience of the past. They need to get united. but most of them do not have any disaster and emergency background, unfortunately. Too much religious, because they're next to, like, location-wise, Afad and the head of the disaster religious affairs are next to each other, 2 buildings. And Vice President of Afad, this has been criticized a lot, and it will be criticized more until the elections, because the Vice President of Afad was appointed from the presidency of the religious affairs. We respect every institution, but everybody should do their own job where they have the expertise. We need people with suitable background in these critical positions. In a country like Turkey, which suffer from any type of hazards like man-made, natural, or technological, we need the really valuable and knowledgeable teams. As Dr. Comfort already mentioned, there were lots of documentation written. Turkey has a National Disaster Response Plan, abbreviated as TAMP in Turkish. Turkey has a National Disaster Risk Reduction Plan, abbreviated in TARAP in Turkish, with provincial documents abbreviated as IRAP, Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction Plans. Turkey had a Turkey National Disaster Strategy document where Dr. Comfort was involved as well back in 2017. Turkey has a National Disaster Risk Reduction Platform. I don't think it exists anymore, so they have different names. I was a member of it, but I only attended 2 meetings back like 5-6 years ago. Turkey has a National Earthquake Strategy Action Plan, abbreviated as NESAP in English, and UTSEP, Ulusal Deprem Strateji Eylem Planı in Turkish. So everything was written, what to do, long-term, short-term, medium-term, actions to be taken. Nothing happened. National Earthquake Council, this is dismissed, and they're trying to re-establish it now. And there's a fancy name, which is called National Risk Shield nowadays. It's brand new. They just started it after the earthquakes in March 2023, this month. I don't know who is involved there, what their role will be, what will be, I mean, there's no need to reinvent the wheel again and again, because we have so many well-written national disaster plans for preparedness, response, and recovery. I don't know where we're going to go from now, but it needs to be really good and concrete, because we will suffer from earthquakes or floods or man-made hazards or avalanches or rock falls in the future for sure. Thank you for your patience. I hope I was on time and didn't bore you. That's my email if you want to contact me, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
The opposite of boring, Burçak. Thank you so much for that, to you, Louise and Süleyman, for the sharing. And we have about 11 minutes left in this first virtual forum. And so how I think I'd like to proceed now is, if you have anything that you want to share in terms of resources, questions you want to ask, and so forth, I think let's use our remaining time for this. Please continue to use the chat to share questions, observations for the field team. And then of course we can stay on here longer, but I also want to honor that we have the 1 hour that we'd set aside, and I know some people have to leave. And so I'm actually going to turn to Courtney Welton Mitchell first, because she had contacted me in advance about an important instrument that they have published. And again, if you want to share, please use the raise hand function if you want to ask a question or have a resource or anything else. So Courtney, would you kick us off? And again, thank you, Louise, Süleyman, and Burçak. Courtney.
Thanks, Lori. And thank you all. This is, really powerful and important information. I just wanted to share a little bit on behalf of the ERI Learning from Earthquakes Public Health Subcommittee. I co-chair that with Louis Ceferino. We have members of that subcommittee on the call. We are in the process of doing a few things. The subcommittee was actually initially started by Nicole Arrett, and she spearheaded an initiative. I'll drop some of these links into the chat, an initiative to develop a social determinants of health, basically public health framework for post-earthquake assessment. That includes 6 domains: housing, water, sand, living conditions, health services, employment and education, and food security. And we are looking to expand one of the domains, that's the health services specific domain, and develop a questionnaire. So that questionnaire also borrows heavily from Judith Matrani-Reiser's work in hospital and health services in terms of comprehensive assessments. And Judy is also involved with the public health subgroup. So again, I can share some of those links. Louis Ceferino is also involved with Kim Shope and others in looking at follow-on NSF proposals around casualty monitoring, epidemiological data to improve that. So we are looking to potentially have a member of the Public Health Subcommittee deploy at some point in the coming weeks. We were initially looking at having someone go with Eduardo, who's looking at hospitals now with ERI group that's there, but we thought it made sense to wait a bit so that we could engage with the health services professionals. We also have some mental health components of this questionnaire and some social science related components around attitudes and beliefs with implications for health services. If anyone wants to contact me offline, I'll also drop my contact information in the chat. Personally, I'm involved, my background is as a humanitarian aid worker and mental health clinician, specializing in traumatic stress studies before I went back to get my doctorate and started working in more academic settings. And I'm involved with the Center for Victims of Torture with some intervention initiatives for response in Syria and in Turkey. So thank you for giving me a few minutes. Again, I'll drop some resources in the chat.
Thank you, Courtney, very much. And Damla, I see you were on here in case there's something you may want to share. And Kim, I saw you had your hand up and went back down, but I know you are very much involved in everything Courtney said. So Kim, I don't know if you want to share before I turn to Justin.
I just wanted to say that one of the things that I think that we need to do is we had applied for funding to go to look at from the Izmit earthquake, and our current NSF program officer is very hesitant to allow Americans to spend NSF money to go into the field in international earthquakes to do that type of work. And so I just want us to make sure that we encourage our current program officer and NSF how important it is that social scientists be involved in these things, and that we be allowed to do that sort of thing in collaboration with our partners in these other areas, both in terms of what it does for us in the United States and our own safety, but also the kinds of lessons that we can learn globally, because we're only safe if the entire globe is safe. So I just wanted to make mention of that.
Thank you, Kim, very much. And I see Joe Johnson on here as well, who may have, and Lucia Rent as well, in anything related to the potential for the NEHRP investigation, which is very much related to what you had to say, Kim. So thank you, Courtney. Justin, I'm going to turn it over to you now for question, comment.
Yeah, well, I wanted to bring in Nurai, if I may. I worked with Nurai about 9 years ago when she was part of the Embrace project in Europe. And so I was looking at social learning across all of these different facets. And she was looking specifically at Turkey earthquake risk. And I just went back to my report this morning as I was reading this, because it was based on partially on what she'd done. And so what do? We look for learning. This is one of the things that we've all talked about this morning. What can be learned from here? But the question is not what can be learned, but who is learning? And I think that there's something that we need to address. There are clear power dynamics in that those that are in power are not learning. And, just going back from, actually looking at this report, the case study on this, I'm just going to briefly read literally 4 lines here. Found issues of trust in communities not trusting their governments to enforce safely built structures was a barrier to communities taking on board safety messages regarding how to repair and respond to earthquake risks. This is borne out by the relative importance given to a range of resilience indicators identified by the local community. And several things comes in from what other people have said. Instead of top down, instead of having bottom up, we've switched to top down. It's become more autocratic and technocratic solutions. But even the technocratic solutions are not being adequately enforced because the building codes are not being enforced. And then when you hear of a president of a country, and I'm trying to be very respectful, saying that we will rebuild everything in a year, you're going, to what standard is everything going to be built? Are we building back better, or are we building back to fail again? And that's not what operational resilience should be. So I'm sorry that it seemed like a soapbox, but I definitely wanted to bring Nuray in because I know she's done so much work in here. And I was reading her words this morning and kind of getting upset by doing so. So apologies if that's the case, but Nuray, please, I'd like to bring you in if I may. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Justin. Nice seeing you again. And history repeats itself. That's what I'm going to say, because currently I'm very much involved with psychosocial support for the survivors. And for secondary traumatization, our organization, Turkish Psychological Association, is working very hard to get organized and to send help to the area. So history repeats itself. It is trust issues, external responsibility attributions, everybody expecting, the community expecting everything from the builders, the government. The story repeats itself, Justin. We have been doing research in Istanbul, which has a very high risk of an earthquake. The same story repeats itself, and we are doing community awareness training programs, and people don't participate. So I'm quite disappointed at everything. I'm just like observing and trying to support the survivors at the moment. But it's very nice that you reminded me of our work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louise.
If I may, I can't manage to make the raise hand function work. I do want to respond to Laurie's first question. Given the sensitivities of the political situation, the upcoming election, is it safe to send researchers to Turkey? And I would say it's absolutely essential to have a Turkish colleague or a Turkish counterpart. What I think would not be helpful is for researchers from any nation to appear unannounced in a community who do not speak Turkish, who have not made the proper contacts. Süleyman and I were welcomed warmly, but we had the support from Professor Rushan Kelesh, his student, Dr. Ovi Saran, who was a former governor, who introduced us to their former students. And so it's a network. And we really need to appreciate that in a society, as Naranji has said, that is very fragmented, these personal connections are really critical. And I think it is very important to keep in mind the respect for the communities and the appreciation for the horrendous set of emotional, traumatic, social, economic conditions they've been living through.
Thank you, Louise.
To say one thing. I was also a student of Rushan Kelesh. He doesn't remember me because he has a lot of students. But as I was in Ankara University in 90s, so I got his class, urbanization policy. So I have to say that here, and thanks to him.
Well, I want to see this network. So I had met Rushan maybe 25, 30 years ago. He sent his graduate students from Ankara University to the University of Pittsburgh, and I had 4, 5, 6 of Rushan's students who graduated in public and international affairs, and most of them became interested in disaster management. So a tribute to—
May I have a brief question, please? May I have a brief question?
Oh, yes, yes.
I would like to congratulate all these distinguished speakers for their excellent presentations. I have a brief question to them. You have visited the area and you have observations made in the field. I was wondering, you can call this disaster managed. This disaster happened in 11 provinces of Turkey as a natural disaster or man-made disaster?
That's a difficult question, Rushan. In my judgment, it's man-made, honestly. And this is the hardest question for countries that have high seismic risk, like Turkey, Japan, California. There's enough knowledge in Turkey, there are enough skilled personnel in Turkey to understand the risk and design buildings that will not fail. But choices have been made to allocate the resources in other ways. And we see the enormous cost in lives, disruption, economic costs, etc. And this is really the challenge of social science research. How can we really create a knowledge base so the people of the country, the people who live in countries that have seismic risk, will really demand safe, strong, stable buildings? I think that's our task as social science researchers.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, for being here, Louise. Thank you for that. And I had a sub question in the chat, someone asking if we would please share the chat after this, because it's been so full of rich resources and dialogue. And so we absolutely will be in contact with Louise, Süleyman, and Burçak to receive their incredibly informative slides, which we'll post on the virtual forum page for this particular event. We'll post the chat, and then please know, if you filled out that Google form, if you're one of the 30, that we will be back in touch with this core team you heard from today, who have already been into the field, as well as to the 30 persons who filled out the Google form expressing interest in joining a social science-led and or multidisciplinary team. And Louise, your words have been heard absolutely loud and clear about the vital nature of this research, it needing to be done, but also it needing to be done with local leadership, with local expertise, and with the collaboration of this incredible global network of expertise that has been brought together here and through SSEER. And so with that, I think because we are a little past our time, we're going to bring this to a close. Know that anyone in here, you can reach out to me directly via email if you have a question in follow up to this. And again, no, I'll be in direct contact with everyone who's responded to date, and ending where we began, with all gratitude to the people of Turkey and Syria, and all respect, all gratitude to those of you who are on this call, and a special thanks to Louise, Burçak, and Süleyman for all that they shared with us today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.